My last year, the most positive thing I've done is try and stop the heritage building huggers hugging individual buildings at a time, and sort of make them understand that, you know, heritage starts with a good idea tomorrow, because we have very little heritage left, and we are going to have to build a new heritage, and we can't wait 40 or 50 years before we actually start rebuilding or claiming things as heritage. First thing I just want to mention is communities, and there's been a lot talked about communities in Christchurch, and a lot of very, very hollow words, and many people said it's great to see these communities forming after the earthquake, but we know the people in Bexley and Aranui are no longer communities, and they've given up in many ways. So it's up to people like you and all those people like Littleton and Sumner, which I always think are very, very important communities which have been hit really hard. But the great thing about them are they identifiable communities. And they're sort of the communities which protect the weakest within them. And I know from experience, communities are measured by the strength of the weakest, not by the determination of the strongest. And, you know, to me, the communities which actually faced the river were communities in themselves, you know, like the Avon Loop and Peterborough Village. They had a focal point, you know, even though you didn't actually understand it. But they were communities which were created within the city, and it's really important that we deal with them. I've been known to be very critical about town planners, and in 1981 I said that if people knew as much about town planning as they knew about apartheid, they would be demonstrating and walking against town planning. And you know, I mean, the things which I struggle with is this planning map, you know. I mean, the colours are the zoning, you know. Some of them is where you shop, some of them is where you live, and some of them are where you work, you know. We have to give this up, you know. Christchurch has the opportunity of changing people's perception about how a city will work in today's life, you know. And it's really important that we demonstrate a change of thinking, not only to the people of Christchurch, but the people of New Zealand and internationally. We have this opportunity, and I'm afraid we're shortchanging it at this stage. Look at this. This is the Avon corridor, and next door to it we are going to get cyclists dressed in lycra going through at great speeds. I would rather see people over 65 being able to do U-turns slowly than cyclists in lycra moving fast past you, because we don't have a city where people have felt confident about coming in and inhabiting it and moving short distances and showing the sort of effort and looking after children and having children in the city, which is really, really important. You know, the great thing about today with geoengineers is that we started talking about not plan but about section. You know, and section is really important. It's the relationship between water and land. It's not about the foreshore and seabed legislation. It's about dragging your waka up from the land at the convenient point, and the distance when you come up to where a river meets the sea is quite different than the cliff out at Scarborough. And so we should be thinking about things in section. It's that ground underneath where we can actually support buildings. And it's the, you know, and I learnt something today. It's that ground between the surface and the supporting ground is like a marble cake. And you know, when kids get hold of a marble cake, they pick out the little brown bits, you know, and mum always complains because, you know, it's so complex, the places that you're living in. So I didn't quite know what to expect today, and at 6 o'clock this morning I decided that I should do a couple of drawings. The first thing, before that, I just actually want to talk about planning language. And here we have, you know, the menu at a second-class restaurant, you know, you know, the only thing which is missing is the olive oil, the virgin olive oil, mind you, you know, and once you've actually consumed it, you know, it's a very disappointing meal, you know. You know, I mean, just look at it. It's a whole lot of words. And the things which we really actually have to look at. This is the only drawing I've done about Christchurch effectively in the last 18 months, and I always vowed I'd never do a drawing because, you know, I always see the right place for an architect is the pencil of joint minds. You know, you need to consume something, you need to have people talking to you, and then finally you draw a line and you know that you are really only the person guiding the joint minds of all of you, because you all have the right to actually influence these sort of lines. This is the Avon River, okay? That's Clumber Street, that's Barbados Street, Manchester Street, Madras Street, and I thought this morning it wouldn't make too much difference and it would help you if we stopped Manchester Street and Madras Street at the river and there was no bridge across there. And then we let, instead of a corridor 20 metres wide, we actually let the water flow back into this area in some form or other, you know. I mean, the actual line doesn't really matter, but the gentleness of hesitation, of threshold, of change, of actually understanding the place that you're coming to is really, really important. And overlaid on that, which is quite significant to what's actually happened to the city, is the inherent land values. Because if we actually look at the zoning map, those commercial properties which were traditional, which were closer to the river and had all the high values, and now got all the low values, and the places further back haven't, you know. So how do we actually change that? You know, in many ways, it's actually starting to share ideas between other people. It's like those construction people. I keep saying to them, you know, you might be good about steel, and you might be good about timber, and you might be good about concrete, but they have to work together. You know, concrete, you know, they all have a place in our society. Concrete is about nature, you know. If you don't give something a good base, if you don't lift that base off the ground, then the other materials can't work. You can't put steel straight into the ground. And in many ways, timber is lighter than steel, and steel is lighter than concrete. And there's a hierarchy of actually how you build things and how you layer things in society. So here we have, you know, a situation where you might finish up with a wetland near the river, and the people in Lycra will come around the back a bit. And when you walk out between quality buildings, which may be high-rise, because I don't think we should deny the ability to build tall buildings, because density becomes really important. And once you build a high-rise building, the economies of them get better. And one of the things that they can do is, in relationship to the high-rise, they can actually build a bund, which means all the land behind them can be strengthened, you know, and this community can work with those beautiful gaps in between. So that's the one drawing. That's just an idea where these buildings are on the south side, the water flows through here, you walk out to those edges which are really important, and the settlement still sits behind with those great gaps in between. And so morning's drawings, and just a suggestion of the sort of things you would start interacting with you guys in some way, at some time, if someone ever gave me some responsibility, but that's it, okay? Okay, question.
Have we got any questions? Beautiful drawings.
You should sign them.
Never sign.
Could I ask, have you resigned from your sort of leadership role or not?
Well, it was a voluntary role, and it just went on for a bit longer. And the mayor and I didn't get on terribly well. Yeah, but you know, I mean, that's by the way. You know, I mean, I'm sort of I started to dress better and cut my hair, so I might be attractive to his wife. Sorry, I shouldn't joke. Okay.
And
Yeah.
with the knowledge that you have about all the different types of piling foundations and all the issues, when do you think someone living in a situation of a T3 is likely to realistically get their house replaced if it has to be replaced? Will that be
Look,
this
you know,
year or next year or the year after?
I mean, we should deal with these things in quite different ways. I mean, engineers are really great if you give them a problem. But you know, when I was talking about the Bexley and Aranui residents, I thought, well, you know, if we replaced those houses with a pontoon foundation, which actually floated, you know, and with tidal warming, you know, they would sort of float around in this beautiful sort of reed place. And as it got higher and higher, they could find themselves with a Fendleton address, which was... and you know, I mean, that's about ground improvement. It's also about improvement of your soul. You know, I mean, we're now asking, you know, those people from Bexley and Aranui, and there's 7,000 sites being condemned, and we've created 20,000 sites on the outskirts of the city, you know, where they have to go further. There's no infrastructure. They're getting old. You know, we're offering them no alternatives. And in the city, the value of land is dropping at about 5% per month. You know, so it becomes cheaper to build in town than it will be on the outskirts. And then we have to buy the infrastructure. The greatest thing that's happened to Christchurch recently is Rangiora. You know, it's the only main street left in Christchurch. You know, you know, people who hate malls go out to Rangiora. You know. So we're trying to convince Valentine's to go out there too, you know. So, you know, it is really, really important. I think that, you know, we should be inventive. You know, we can float things, which is really important. We have good underlying land values, really intrinsic land values. We can put buildings on any types of site. It's a matter of cost. And one of the things which, you know, I've said to many people, we actually have to think inventively about the economics of building. You know, I mean, one of the people I know who built 10,000 housing units in the United States in the 70s, where we had an international monetary crisis at the same time, he took up pieces of land and he said, right to the infrastructure people, he said, this land is worth so and so. He said, and in 21 years time, it's worth this, I'll freehold it in 21 years. And with that package, he designed a minimum of 200 to 300 housing units. He thought he was going to sell it to the over 55s. He had them well architecturally designed. They were great sort of townhouses with courtyards, and you could actually have a cat, and you can have a dog, and you could have an incumbent teenager and a mother-in-law that won't die, you know. And they are, you know, they are the criterias for great housing, you know. And so, you know, he did this, and then he went to a bank and he said, you know, you lend at 6% for 5 years, that's your maximum loan, but we'll give you 300 loans at, if you lend for 7%, at 0.5% less. And the banks took it up, and then he put the product out, and the two things which he didn't actually think would happen. He sold it, most of them to two working couples between 45 and 50, no, 35 and 50, and he said, most of those people took up the freehold, which was guaranteed every year at a certain price after 5 years, and they could have taken it over after 21. So that actually changed the whole perception of actually how you got into housing. And we are going to see a lot of people come back down to Christchurch. There are people who haven't lived here before. They're going to come down here because there's an opportunity. So we really actually have to think through the economics. We actually have to think about how we're going to build. And we have to build the greatest city in the Western world. Rebuild. The bits we rebuild, we have to do bloody well, you know. Okay.
Who was that again? Can you repeat who was it? Who was
He was the advisor to President, one of the presidents in the 70s. I can never remember
What's his
their
name?
names.
Do you recall his name?
Yeah. Bushby. He was a Bushby. Yeah.
Bushby.
Yeah. Mm.
By detecting your response to me, what you're really saying is most important foundation this city needs right now is not the concrete in the ground, it's a trust and confidence in the politicians.
It's having a
Leading the
vision,
city,
and it's
or not
providing. It's having a vision, and it's providing options, and it's not to sort of say, well, here's the need here, and we'll do it quickly. You know, speed is not as important as providing people with a vision and a framework. You know, and some sort of confidence that you can deliver. You know, a variety of product through to other people. People, you know, are so damn adaptable, you know. I mean, when I was a kid, we used to have coffee and chicory out of a bottle, you know, and now people just sort of move from one cafe to the other because the coffee isn't good enough, you know. I mean, we change so quickly. You know, someone said at an architectural conference about 5 years ago, coffee's made more change to the physical environment of New Zealand in the last 10 years than architecture's made in the last 150. Well, they got something right, you know. And, you know, people have been ready for change. There are some people who are totally disillusioned, and I feel really, really sad for them. And they are going to start talking with, well, they've already started talking with their feet, you know, and it's going to continue, you know. I don't have to do my job any longer. I can pick up the crumbs.
Ian, how would you like to see the centre of the city? Would you like to see it still being called a central business district?
You know, I mean, if you're looking at a city, you actually have to look at every city quite differently. You actually have to look what you've got. You can't actually go and say, oh, the malls don't work any longer. You know, the malls didn't work, the city created the malls. This is a 40, 50-year problem of not caring about land use, you know. This is 40 or 50, you know, the earthquake woke it up. You know, the earthquake was an awakening call, you know. Someone's done something different. You know, I mean, this is really important to get right. You know, it's a city which might be quite a different model. You know, but you actually, in the middle of town, you actually have to cater for those people who can only afford, you know, the rentals or a little bit more than they did before. You can't build buildings based on a European model of between 4 and 7 stories, you know. You might have to say that, you know, you can build 2, 3, 4-storied buildings, and we don't actually have to get people on wheelchairs to the floor above ground, you know. I mean, we don't have to do that for the first part. We do actually have to have a temporary model. The start-up near Ballantyne's is a start, but you can't leave them alone. You know, you have to build an intermediate model, you know. Then the heritage sort of vultures will actually say, you know, post-earthquake buildings, we'll register them in, you know, sort of 2060, you know, and so we'll have to put a rule on, they all have to be painted black, you know. So, you know, I mean, but we do actually have to think quite differently about the city. You know, as a person who's passionate about heritage, I said, well, the only thing left in heritage are the roads. After talking about with Diane, I'd want to actually change the roads, you know, to save Peterborough Village. If you drop off Manchester Street and Madras Street going north and create this beautiful space, then you've got a place to work around, you know, and you can build, you've got an identifiable area to work in. The Avon Loop has always been an identifiable area, but what we have to do is make those identifiable areas in town. We have to, for instance, you know, we know that 1.5 million people go to the botanical gardens every year. Of those, 500 people used to shop in the city. Well, why would you want to restrict the shopping to the one side of the Avon River when you have to restore the Arts Centre, which is going to cost you $250 million, where the rental from the Arts Centre is only $3 or $4 million up to now per year? If you're going to spend $250 million, you have to get $25 million in rent, and the only way to do that in the Arts Centre is to actually have some bloody good retail. You get those people from the gardens straight through the Arts Centre to Ballantyne's. You know, to me, that's a simple way of actually dealing with the city. You know, people love the gardens, and they also love moving past them. And you have to be able to take people slowly through the city. You know, I know.
But what, you know, sorry to interrupt that. I think what's beautiful about your thinking in section and this set of sketches is that it's creating the equivalent of almost what Di referred to 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. Finally, you got a beach. finally you got a fantastic living room for Christchurch, and that it's based around the river, and it's giving a completely new kind of space that's really starting to make sense for me, and the sense of Christchurch being this garden city. It's a garden river city.
But then you've got a different type of living room down to the estuary, for instance.
As well.
The change in how you deal with the Heathcote, you know, where the cutting is now past its use-by date, and there's a beautiful sort of ring around there. You know, these are the sorts of things, you don't have to do them, but you actually have to model your thinking on them, you know, and once you model your thinking on them, you come to conclusions which are much more positive than the ones which, you know, we're going to do everything right, and we're going to do it quickly, you know.
Yeah.
You know, people, everyone likes to dream. The big picture is important, the detail is important, and the final decision is a result of joint minds.